Situated on the southern margin of the major Amadeus sedimentary basin, the park comprises extensive sand plains, dunes and alluvial desert, punctuated by the Uluru monolith and Kata Tjuta. Although the geological features of Ayers Rock and the Kata Tjuta are the most evident features of Uluru Park, it's recognized that the cultural values of the site are significant. These relate to the religious and mythic beliefs of the native Aboriginal population. As a cultural landscape presenting the combined works of nature and man, manifesting the interaction of mankind and its natural environment, the landscape of the Uluru-Kata Tjuta National Park is the outcome of millennia of management under traditional Anangu procedures governed by the Tjukurpa. A unique cultural adaptation to the desert environment enabled Anangu and related groups in the Western Desert to develop social groups which were based on semi-permanent water sources, but which held reciprocal rights of access over plants and animal resources in the intervening areas. This adaptation is of outstanding and universal value. Hunting and gathering have characterized by far the greater part of human socio-cultural evolution, yet Anangu represent one of the few contemporary hunting and gathering cultures. Their adaptation is all the more significant in view of the failure of colonial settlers to devise a viable alternative in the same environment. The outstanding universal value of the park is established by the presence within it of the huge monoliths of Uluru and Kata Tjuta, which Anangu and non-Anangu acknowledge, together with the unique pattern of traditional land management and its basis in the oral narratives of ancestral beings of the Tjukurpa. Uluru-Kata Tjuta National Park covers 132,566 hectares of arid ecosystems close to the centre of Australia, 1,420 kilometres south of Darwin, 335 kilometres southwest of Alice Springs in the Northern Territory, and 1,270 kilometres northwest of Adelaide in South Australia. The cultural landscape of the Uluru-Kata Tjuta National Park is of immense significance. It's an outstanding illustration of a highly successful model of human adaptation to a hostile arid environment which has survived for at least 5 millennia. The ecosystem is exploited by its human hunter-gatherer population to its full potential, which is heightened by the practice of controlled or mosaic burning. The park also graphically demonstrates the intimate symbolic relationship between man and the landscape in this non-monumental culture. Desert flora is perfectly adapted to the harsh conditions of the desert. The growth and reproduction of plant communities rely on irregular rainfall. Some plants are able to survive fire, some are dependent on it to reproduce. Plants are an important part of Tjukurpa, and there are ceremonies for each of the major plant foods. Many plants are associated with ancestral beings. Uluru and Kata Tjuta are outstanding among the nodes in the network of ancestral tracks established during the Tjukurpa. The former because of the extraordinary density of sites within the perimeter of the monolith, and the latter because of its position on one of the most sacred tracts. The Anangu Tjukurpa is an outstanding example of an indigenous philosophy which regulates all aspects of life, from foraging behaviour, management of the landscape, and social relationships to personal identity. It provides an account of the origin of being and a theory of causality. The landscape the first Aboriginal people saw looked much the same as it does today. Geologists have found that the dunes have remained in their present position for 30,000 years. However, the crests of the dunes are loose as sand and shift with the wind. The cultural landscape of the Uluru-Kata Tjuta National Park is an outstanding illustration of successful human adaptation over many millennia to the exigencies of a hostile arid environment, the integrity of which would be threatened by any change to the present management system based on the practices of its traditional owners. The dramatic monoliths of Uluru-Kata Tjuta form an integral part of the traditional belief system of one of the oldest human societies in the world. The listing of Uluru-Kata Tjuta National Park as a World Heritage Property for its natural and cultural values represents years of work by Anangu to assert their role as custodians of their traditional lands. This international recognition is a significant victory for Anangu, as it confirms the validity of Tjukurpa as being the primary tool for looking after country. Kata Tjuta, meaning many heads to the Australian Aborigines, is a group of more than 30 rounded red conglomerate masses of rock rising out of the desert plain. Some of the rocks are bunched close together with only narrow precipitous crevices between them. Others, rounded and polished by the wind, are more spaced apart. The highest is called Mount Olga. The rocks, also known as the Olgas, named after the Queen of Spain in 1872, when the rocks were first explored by a white man, like their nearby neighbour Uluru, have been sacred to the Aborigines since time immemorial, and figure prominently in their legends about the dreaming, the time of creation. The Aborigines identify Mount Olga as the home of the snake Wanambi, who, during the rainy season, stays curled up in a waterhole on the summit. During the dry season, he moves down to the gorge below. He also uses the various caves on Mount Olga. The hairs of his beard are the dark lines on the eastern side of the rock. His breath is the wind which blows through the gorge. When he gets angry, it can become a hurricane. The first European to see Uluru was the explorer Goss, who named it Ayers Rock after the then Chief Secretary of New South Wales. The year before, Ernest Giles had named it Kata Tjuta after Queen Olga of Württemberg. A short period of competitive exploration began to investigate the possibilities of the area for pastoral expansion once the overland telegraph, constructed in the 1870s, had made it more accessible for colonization. But in less than 20 years, the sponsors of these explorations withdrew, concluding that this country was too arid for occupation. In the first decades of the 20th century, the Commonwealth, South Australian and Western Australian governments declared extensive reserves in Central Australia as sanctuaries for the Anangu speakers of several related dialects, designed to protect them from unfavourable contact with white Australians while they were being re-educated into European culture. Anangu resisted assimilation, frequently leaving missions and government settlements to return to a traditional lifestyle. Kapi, or water, is a scarce and precious resource in the arid environment and plays an important role in Anangu life. Anangu consider that all water sources in the park are caused by or have an association with the Tjukurpa, and knowledge of the location and temporal availability of water sources has always been an essential component of Anangu ability to survive when travelling through country. There are two types of water found within Uluru-Kata Tjuta National Park: surface water and groundwater. Uluru and Kata Tjuta lie near the southern margin of an area geologists call the Amadeus Basin. This depression in the Earth's crust formed about 900 million years ago and received layer upon layer of sediment over several hundred million years. This stopped about 300 million years ago. At times, the Amadeus Basin was a shallow sea collecting these sediments. Some of it was blocked off from the sea and the water evaporated, leaving crusted salt. A cold period left deposits of glacial rock.